Hey everybody, King's Rook here. I'm really excited to do this video for FTL. Finally reviewing it. I did 3 Let's Play videos that kind of follow up to this review. I labeled them as part of the review. I mean, they're basically just Let's Plays. They're about 20 minutes long a piece, which is way longer than I intended to make them. So I'm going to try and keep the video here quite a lot shorter than that. Now I'm going to link to the unified gaming model that I really enjoyed from Bart Stewart on Gamasutra, whichever you prefer, really. I suppose, I'm sure there's a correct way to say it. Not that I really care too much for it right now. But there are 4 Bartle types that I'm going to score the game on, basically. Now, it's not really whether or not the game is good, it's whether or not it's good for you if you are one of these archetypes. Don't hold all of the stock in these archetypes, really, but I would pay a little bit of attention to how they measure up to with you. Now, FTL is a single-player game, but I'm still using these Bartle types, and hopefully over time you'll see why. Especially with the unified gaming model. I also have 4 metrics that I'm going to score the game on. I'm going to go ahead and jump right on into that. First one being learning curve. Now, the learning curve, I gave an 8 to FTL because it's really easy to pick up and run with. I only gave it an 8 because it's also a little bit frustrating at times, especially when it kicks you back to the beginning. But then again, if it didn't kick you back to the beginning and just always let you get away with things and losing, then I also would give the next metric a lot lower score, which the next metric I'm going to go ahead and move right on into is challenge. Now, I gave challenge an 8 because there is a good balance of risk versus reward. But I only gave it an 8 because you can also kind of pause and just stop and strategize. It's not very Twitch based, and there's a lot of randomness, which again, inherent to roguelikes. So, you know, it's also just kind of something that goes along with the genre. So, next up is depth. Now, for depth, consider something along the lines of story. Now, I only gave FTL a 7 in depth, but that's still higher than a 5, but it is lower than a 10, so take it for what it is. Now, the reasoning behind that, I think there's a lot of value to not overdoing it with story, because sometimes that can detract from the actual gameplay and somebody's enjoyment of the game. I also think that there is not a lot of accessibility to extra depth, behind the scenes story, action, you know, the history of all the races or something like that. Some people really dig that. So that being absent, at least from my view of the game, is leading me to give it only a 7. Last metric is replayability. Now, obviously, as a roguelike, it's going to score very high, and in fact, I gave it a 10 because I think FTL does a great job of providing replayability. Lots of, you know, as long as you're into the game, there are options to replay it, and that's really what it comes down to. If you don't like the game in the first place and you're not really into it, then it doesn't really matter how much replayability factor it has, you're just going to stray away from it anyways. Now, on the other hand, there are lots of options and ways to replay the game without getting stale, and that's what this really means. I think FTL did this really well. Now, moving right on into the Bartle types, there are Killer, Achiever, Explorer, and Socializer. So, for killers, it's not just in MMOs and MUDs, that's usually the PvPers, the against players. I don't quite associate it only with that because I also, from the model, the unified model, I also throw in experientialist, and I think there was kineticist or something like that. Basically, meaning a killer is the kind of type that would love some first-person shooter competitive multiplayer kind of thing, where they get to go head to head with other players. That's not really present in FTL, so I couldn't really recommend this to a killer archetype. So now, on the other hand, the Achiever archetype I definitely recommend with FTL. You're certainly going to find a lot of achievements. There are ships to unlock. There are things to discover in the game about the rules and the game set, which also kind of overlay with the Achiever. Now, the last two, Explorer and Socializer, I'm just going to kind of blaze through. Don't really recommend it for either too much. More so the Explorer than the Socializer. With the Explorer, the randomization, it doesn't really lead to a rich, deep world. Now, on the other hand, there is story, as I mentioned, so you could probably get a kick out of that. While the Socializer archetype, I would say, wouldn't really get a kick out of FTL as much if you're very strongly in the Socializer camp, because there's no multiplayer aspect to the game. So it's kind of hard to recommend to a Socializer. So that's really all I wanted to go over for this review. Overall, I would definitely recommend FTL. Just in general, it's a well-made and a very thorough game. Also, as of this time, there's kind of an advanced pack and a patch that you should be watching out for if you haven't already read up on it. I'm going to go ahead and set a link to that as well. It's really exciting. They're adding an extra race. They're adding another, say, I think there's like 13 extra ships that they're adding, or 13 or 12 extra ships and layouts that they're adding. They're adding a layout to each of the ships. Extra race, extra rules, really interesting stuff that I'm pretty excited about to jump back into the game for more playtime. So thanks very much for joining me for this review. Thanks extra much if you've gone back and checked out the videos that I did leading up to the review. But I appreciate your time given to watching me ramble on about things that I love. So again, I'm King's Rook, and I'll see you out on the virtual battlefields.